Welcome to Charts Today. My name's David Linton, and today's edition for Thursday, the 16th of August, comes to you from London. And we start by looking at the dollar index. Dollar just tailing off a little bit the last day, but it has been still pushing higher. Of course, the long-term chart starting to change direction here, and the medium-term looking very bullish indeed. So the euro is strengthening a little bit on that dollar weakness over the last 24 hours, but still looking pretty bearish against the dollar. And we've got these downside targets now of 109, which is 4% lower. So we are just seeing that weakness still hanging there. Selling off against the yen. Yen stronger, of course, as a safe haven along with the dollar, but the yen has the upper hand over the last 24 hours. But still dollar strength dominates longer term. Looking at sterling, sterling sitting at 127.15, so bearish against the dollar, and the lagging line on the weekly chart starting to enter territory soon where we would be bearish as well. Taking a look at the euro sterling chart, sterling weakening against the euro as well, and against the Swiss franc, still bearish on all three time frames, and against the Aussie dollar sitting at 174.85, just turning short term bearish again. So that Aussie dollar strength just weighing there. Looking at Bitcoin, we're sitting at $6,370. So bullish on the short-term chart, bearish medium and long-term still. The downside target's not so clear on Bitcoin. We do have one to 5,900. That's about 6% downside. And a few mini upside targets. Interesting how Bitcoin on this medium-term chart has found support. We've come all the way back to support lines that were generated a long, long time ago. So it does suggest that Bitcoin might be finding some support at these levels. Looking at the S&P 500 index, last night the US markets were down. S&P was down 0.75%, and that's taking us bearish in the short-term chart. Nasdaq was down 1.2%, 1.25%, so that's taking us bearish short-term as well. And the Dow was also down 0.5%, but in bearish territory on the short-term chart too. The Russell 2000 index was actually down 1.3%, and again taking us into bearish territory. So US stocks looking less good. The futures this morning, we're seeing the S&P future up 0.3%, the Nasdaq E-mini up 0.5%, so it does suggest that the US market will open a bit higher, retracing some of those losses yesterday. FTSE is bearish below the cloud on the 100 index. The UK mid caps also bearish short term, medium term as well, and short term. So still the outlook not great for the UK market. The DAX is actually still looking pretty bearish on the medium and short-term charts. So although we've got a slight recovery this morning, DAX still looking pretty bearish, and the CAC Quarante also pushing lower. So we see here that's looking pretty bearish too. In Japan overnight, the market was down 0.5%, so still looking pretty bearish there on the medium and short-term charts. Hong Kong was down a further 0.8%, so making new 12-month lows there. So that's looking pretty bearish. And the Shanghai market was actually down a further 0.2%, testing the lows we saw a couple of weeks ago, and still looking pretty bearish all around Chinese stocks. The Sensex, the Indian market, looking a lot stronger, was down 0.33%, but still holding its bull trends. And the Aussie market was actually little changed, looking pretty strong relative to other Asian markets. Looking at Brent crude, we're sitting at $71 this morning, so we're up 0.4%, but bearish on those medium and short-term charts. WTI also bearish on the short and medium term charts, although we're up 2.2%. US nat gas in the doldrums in the mid 290s, sitting at 294, and really at the moment not showing any clear direction either way. But the medium and short term picture is looking better than it has for a while. Taking a look at heating oil, a similar picture to crude as you might expect. Coffee still looks very bearish on all three time frames. Cocoa also looks bearish on all three time frames. Sugar is actually also looking pretty bearish. So soft commodities still looking bearish, stronger dollar, weaker commodities. Taking a look at precious metals, gold sitting at 1181 at the moment, has really fallen off very heavily over the last few months, and trying to stage a recovery from the 1160 that we saw yesterday. So it'll be interesting to see whether we can actually just recover off those lows. But gold looks like it's staging something of a recovery. We did have these downside targets 1161. That's kind of where we got to, and there's no real clear downside targets on the short term, the medium term charts from here. We do have further downside on the 60-minute chart, and if we look at the 1-minute chart, we see here 1156 was a target. We didn't quite get there, and we don't really have any clear upside targets yet, so it's quite hard to call gold at the moment. Looking at silver, we see here silver is looking pretty bearish indeed, and we've got lots of downside targets on the medium term chart, unlike gold. US 10-year yield sitting at 2.88%, so 2.88, and just coming off the bottom here a little bit, but just struggling to move higher. Looking at the tech majors, yesterday we saw quite a sell-off across the board really. Apple actually bucked the trend a little bit. They were up 0.23%. Amazon was down nearly 2% after a very strong performance over the last several months. And Google, we also saw a sell-off yesterday, down 2.2%, taking Google bearish again on the short-term chart. And Facebook also just struggled down just under 1%. Still hasn't really recovered from those falls we saw in July. Microsoft was down 1.7%. So we saw quite a lot of sell-off across the board on tech yesterday, which accounted for the Nasdaq being down so much. Netflix down a further 3%, now lower than the levels that we saw in the sell-off last month. So we're really seeing Netflix fading away and starting to look more and more bearish on the medium term. And Tesla's been in the news quite a lot, and we're seeing here down 2.5% yesterday. So not quite yet bearish, not looking as bad as Netflix, but not the outlook is decreasing here. So it'll be interesting to see how Tesla reacts to that. That's it for today. Until tomorrow, happy charting. See you then.